welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you're doing well and are enjoying the podcast and the topics we've covered so far. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date.
So today we're going to be covering 5 ways to lower your calories when cooking, and this is probably one of the things that I often discuss when clients are talking about managing their weight a bit better, getting a bit healthier, that we might talk about how they're cooking foods, different things that they might not even realise are slowly adding up the calories, and we don't want that to happen because people often isn't effort that's the issue, and people also just go straight to blame themselves that they're not putting enough effort in. Actually, they usually are putting enough effort in. It's just making sure that effort's going in the right place. So having a few different tips around how to potentially get more bang for your buck in your meals, making sure that your calories aren't creeping up if you're trying to manage your weight or improve lifestyle conditions such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and helping with your blood pressure and things like that. These sort of things can make the difference because it's not a one-off thing. It's not going to be, well, if I do this week, it's going to make all the difference. Actually, these are things that are going to make a little bit of difference, but because we do them so often, that soon adds up over a long time. So first of all is having protein or a leaner source of protein at each meal and not having the higher sort of fat content in the food. So getting rid of the fatty cuts of meats and trying to embrace these leaner cuts and making them more flavorful. So just to give you a few ideas of ones that are potentially a bit leaner to include. So a skinless chicken breast, again 100 grams has about 230 calories per 100 grams. White fish 100 grams varies between 150 to 200 calories. Turkey is always a really good option as well. It can be a bit dry, but again, depending on how you're cooking it, what seasonings and things like that you're having with it, can be quite flavorful and a really, really mindful or a calorie and fat aware, mindful approach to it. So 100 grams of that is 170 calories. If you want some vegetarian options, lentils, 100 grams has about 230 calories. Beans, about 130 calories per 100 grams. And tofu, 100 grams, about 80 calories. Plus, on those vegetarian options as well, you'll get some additional fibre, which will help with fullness alongside the protein. Again, keeping you fuller for longer. So why do we do this? Well, there's some really good research to support this as well. So 2019 study found that replacing just 5% of your saturated fat, and this is what we talk about when protein sources that are fatty, usually it's got higher saturated fat content, which tends to have negative connotations long term when it comes to health. It's not as clear cut as that, but cutting it down is probably the safer option long term, but also helps with cutting calories down as well. So replacing just 5% of saturated fat with unsaturated fat, which could be something like a olive oil or even just getting a sort of oily fish in there, which again has slightly more calories, but again has those omega-3s that we sort of benefiting our heart health long term, led to significant decreases in their LDL cholesterol, which is what we'd call quote unquote bad cholesterol, and is a major risk factor for heart disease. Cardiovascular disease is the biggest killer across the world. So again, just being mindful of your saturated fat content, especially from lean proteins, from protein sources, by swapping in for a leaner protein source could make all the difference when we're looking at heart health long term. So again, if we touch on an example here that I've written down, if you think about a piece of baked salmon, 100 grams, 230 odd calories, instead of a fried pork chop, and pork chops was something that quite popular still, especially during in the older generation. So 100 grams of pork chop, again, you might have 200 gram pork choppers in the weight. That's got over 320 calories in it. So again, swapping to a leaner source, you could be halving the calories from that protein source and still getting a huge amount of protein, but really reducing the amount of calories you're getting from saturated fats particularly. So again, it's not going to make the difference in one meal, but that one meal five times a month or whatever, or maybe even like 2 or 3 times a week, makes a big difference over the course of a year or two. And we know that as we get older and older, that sort of risk factors increase depending on our habits and behaviors. But if you're getting, well, as we are getting a bit older, you might start to think about making some changes to improve your heart health, and this could be one of them, whilst also reducing the calories. Number 2, and I was going to do a post on this one alone because I think it's just a really big factor that people just need to get on board with, and a big lesson could just be you've got to sort of learn to love fruits and vegetables as an adult if you want to get healthier long term. And that's going to sound quite blunt, but there's a huge amount of benefits, but a huge amount of research support the fruit and vegetable intake being associated with a lot better health incomes and diet quality. So just getting on board with the fact that I know they don't taste the nicest in the world, but they can taste pretty damn good if you learn how to cook them properly. So again, that's a completely different episode before I get down to rabbit hole. But increasing your fruits and vegetables, or your vegetables in particular at meals, can really help reduce your calories. So things like adding broccoli, spinach, bell peppers, carrots per 100 grams, we're going to be all like less than 30-40 calories, pardon me. So you can get a huge amount of food for not many calories, add a huge amount of texture, flavors and taste, plus are packed with lots of vitamins, minerals, fiber, and they're all beneficial to overall health. So it all aligns up to having better health outcomes long term, and can be really, really beneficial to actual enjoyment of the meal as well, and add a lot of texture, flavors and taste to it. If you like roasting them and seasoning them, it can just make heaps of difference. So when we have a look at some of the research, a 2020 study found that increasing vegetable intake by just 1 serving per day was associated with a lower risk of heart disease and stroke. So again, like I said, as we're getting a bit older, those sort of things can rear their heads. So just increasing your vegetable intake just by 1 serving a day could have a significant impact on reducing your risk. Good tactic that I find is to try and fill half your plate, if not a third, quarter of it, but try and build that up over time with lots of different vegetables if you can, roasting veggies in a tin, seasoning them up, putting a little bit of olive oil on them, shaking it about, and getting some carrots in there, getting some cabbage, broccoli, some sweet potato. You can have a really, really diverse meal that's really damn flavourful. Throw it on some cayenne pepper, some paprika, some oil, throwing in some garlic and onions. It can really, really just add a huge amount to a meal, makes it so much more delicious whilst keeping calories down a bit as well. So maybe ditching potentially some of the carbohydrates, or those complex carbohydrates, and reducing them a little bit. I'm not saying get rid of them, but reducing and replacing them with some vegetables can really, really make a difference to the overall quality of the meal, but also save a huge amount of calories as well. Number 3, and I feel like this is one that most people tend to do, but is a real good one to be reminded of, is to embrace non-stick stuff. Non-stick cookware can make a huge amount of difference to the cooking experience. It makes it a lot more enjoyable, and people enjoy cooking, they're more likely to cook at home more often. And if we can include some more healthy changes in that cooking, it could be a huge recipe for better health long term. So a 2017 study found that using non-stick pans significantly reduced overall fat intake compared to traditional pans. That makes sense. You haven't got people putting in heaps and heaps of oil, different types of oil in there as well. So putting a little drizzle on your pan just to help get some flavour into the food. One of the posts, I think it was on TikTok a while ago, of a way to, if you're putting too much oil in your pan, just getting some kitchen roll and soaking it up a bit can actually take a huge amount away. It blew up a little bit, and people really, really kicked off saying I was being so wasteful, but I thought it was a really good demonstration. So again, another thing, if you've got a pan there and you're putting some oil in there and you've put too much in, then just getting a bit of tissue paper and some kitchen roll, which is a bit tougher, to soak it up a bit, whilst also moving it around the pan to sort of make sure you've got enough on the pan to make sure things don't ruin your non-stick, can be a really good way to reduce your calories as well. So things like grilling, baking, air fryers, which are really popular at the moment as well, protein sources such as your chicken, can make a big difference to when we actually cook them when they're fried, just with the calorie content in there as well. It can save 50, 100 calories per 100 grams compared to frying in oil. And that, again, you might think, well, that's not much. It's a fair amount of calories, really. But if you think that we might be doing that once or twice a day across 5 to 7 days a week, those calories soon add up to the amount that you're saving. So again, maybe we're doing a few of these at once, so we're increasing our vegetables in there, we're using non-stick pans, getting leaner protein source in there. Those small amounts of calories that we're saving there can really, really add up over the course of a week, a month, a year especially. We think long-term health, some of those other health benefits like reduced risk of heart disease and stroke. The reason is, why aren't we doing it? And it's just about trying to do it as consistently as we can, getting better at it, and really trying to implement these habits for our overall health and well-being long term. Number 4 on the list is learning to grill food or embracing the grilling element a bit more as well. So grilling meat, fish, veggies means that we don't really have to add any oil. Again, that saves calories as well. So a 2015 study found that grilled chicken breasts had 25% fewer calories than pan-fried counterparts, which again, looking at that, quarter of the calories, less calories than the pan-fried. Again, it just those, that's when you're having once or twice a week, a couple of times a month, again, that really adds up over time. So exploring different spices, marinades that you can add to these when you're grilling them. Again, just getting really familiar with the spice rack, unlocking all these flavors without sacrificing the flavor in there and without adding too many calories in there, and really saving them up as well. Again, adds a huge amount of diversity to the meal, different textures, different flavors, tastes, but also saves on a heap of calories as well. Last but not least was being mindful with the oil content within food, or even on dressings and things like that. So treat oil, and this is a bit of advice, treating oil like a precious spice and not a cooking base is a really good approach to this. We don't want to be lathering it all over there. I know it tastes good, it makes food taste good, especially when we put it under heat, especially when we're adding salt, a bit of sugar or some other flavors in there. It makes food taste really nice, but trying to use as little as we need to rather than more than we need can make a huge difference. And just to put it in perspective, a single tablespoon of olive oil has 120 calories in. Again, doesn't sound like much, but if you're meant to put in 1 tablespoon, but you put in 3, then that's an extra 240 calories in there. So portion control is key. Potentially invest in using a measuring spoon, a drizzle, a spray, or even like a brush to coat things rather than just liberally pouring everywhere and having that big pocket of oil at the bottom. Actually learning how to save on it, and which means that you don't have to buy oil as often as well, which again is a little win. So a 2013 study found that people who used visual cues like smaller containers for oil consumed less oil compared to those who used large containers. So again, instead of having that big bottle there, putting it in a little spray bottle, putting it in a little compartment where you can brush it out and things like that, just means that you won't be prompted to use more, which again will save on calories long term. So again, with that, having a look at other cooking methods like grilling, as we've said, using non-stick pans, but also steaming, boiling foods, poaching them, which again require little to no oil, can save a huge amount of calories as well. So there we have it, the 5 things. So leaner protein sources, got some animal sources and vegetarian options there, increasing the amount of vegetables in the diet, as a consequence getting a lot more volume of our food for less calories. Using non-stick pans and cooking equipment means that we don't need to add much, if any, oil at all. Mastering the grill, getting used to grilling food and seasoning it properly to get the most out of it without adding in heaps of calories. And then being mindful with additional oil, using smaller containers where you can be more mindful around the amount that you're using with brushes, with sprays, with measuring spoons, rather than just pouring it on liberally and adding a heap load of additional calories to your meal.
So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all other social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, click the link below and inquire about working with me. Remember to subscribe to the Balanced Approach podcast wherever you're listening for more insightful episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.